Hello and welcome back to Deep Sleep Creep YouTube channel. Today we are going to be listening to creepy encounter horror stories. So get comfortable and let's begin. I'm a 23-year-old female and I attended a Halloween costume party this past weekend. I had gone with a couple of my friends to a mutual friend's Halloween party. There was a big bonfire, booze and some of that green stuff going around. So there was a big crowd. To make matters a little creepier, the friend's house is far off the main road. No neighbours for miles, surrounded by sugarcane fields, and the nearest paved road was about 2 miles up from the dirt road that you had to drive down to actually reach the house. Given the natural spooky season vibe, there was a natural chill factor. I was getting food from the food table when a guy walked up and stood across from me. He was wearing a burlap Scarecrow-looking mask. I've seen it before at party stores. It's creepy yet very commercial looking. Hey, Halloween is just a night for girls to dress up like skanks. Nice to meet you too. Now get away from the mac and cheese, please, I was thinking. I can't believe you actually left the house like that. I was stunned, and I really didn't know how to respond. To be honest, the only thing I was thinking was, what did I do to you? I'm just trying to get my mac and cheese and buffalo chicken dip, as that was my only focus because it looked good. I ignored this guy because I could immediately tell that he was hoping for some kind of attention. It's a little tight around the top, isn't it? Okay, Scarecrow. I don't know how Dorothy did things in Oz, but I can't control the ladies sitting on the upstairs balcony, and it's a Ghostbuster costume. I know skanky, as you would put it, but it confused me even more why he was being suck a dick, because it wasn't like my costume was that promiscuous. And if he had a problem, he was welcome to leave and enjoy himself. Have fun doing whatever it is that you're doing, I said, as I got my food and walked back towards my friends. Something about the Scarecrow seemed off, aside from his abrasive personality. I tried my best to avoid looking in his direction, but when I did, he was either sitting alone or attempting to talk to some girl that managed to find herself briefly alone. I had lost my friends for a short time, and my good pal, the Scarecrow, came over and had a seat next to me. He just sat cross-legged and let his arms drape over a surface behind him. "Where do you stay at?" he asked. I got up and walked away. I don't know what world he lives in where he thinks I would answer that question. Not one that I live in. I knew probably about 60% of the party people here, but I couldn't place a name to his voice. It didn't sound familiar from the voice alone. Nerd alert, but he kind of sounded like the Bretons from Skyrim. I hope someone knows what that means, otherwise let's ignore that nerdy comment. I told my friend who was the party host we were at, that the Scarecrow was being a little too creepy for my taste. I asked if she knew who he was, but she claimed she hadn't seen anyone in that costume. I pointed him out to her, but she didn't know who he was. It was getting late and I was attempting to leave. I was only one of maybe a dozen people left standing. The rest had either gone home or were dealing with alcohol-related roadblocks in their journey home. There hadn't been any sign of the Scarecrow for about an hour. As I'm about to get in my car, I was jump-scared by who you would have guessed. The 6-foot-tall Scarecrow man who thought it was a great idea to pop out from behind a vehicle. Too bad. I would have ran him over. Sorry for my dry sense of humour, I was just that pissed. What's your problem? I've been trying to talk to you all night and you won't give me any of your time. That's the problem. You slutty women look at people like me like we're not good enough. Geez, this was uncomfortable. I wasn't talking to him because he was being disrespectful. He was mean and a jerk. And it just baffles me how he didn't understand that. This was just another step towards being uncomfortable. I wouldn't give somebody like that my time or attention because he didn't deserve it. You can't just insult people and think I would have a nice time talking to you. I told him that I wasn't interested and that I needed him to leave me alone. He kept rambling on, and I finally asked who he was. His response was simple and unsettling. He chuckled and said, "I wouldn't dare show you what's underneath Carly Beth." That's a line from Goosebumps, to those of you that don't know. I had to look it up because it sounded familiar. Suddenly my friend's, let's call her Taylor's boyfriend, ran over towards me and stopped when he was between me and the Scarecrow guy, out of breath. "Sorry, Taylor, told me to walk you to your car," he said, looking at me. He looked at the Scarecrow and waved him off and told him to fly away, little canary. The Scarecrow guy turned away and left. Not sure where he went, but it wasn't near me. I thanked him and was able to leave in peace, but I kept checking my rear-view mirrors for anyone that may have been following me. Because I'm also really cautious, I checked under my car for tracking devices. Maybe a bit of an overreaction, but I've never been kidnapped and wasn't planning on that night being the night. I texted my friend and asked about the guy. She still doesn't know who he was, but she theorizes it was a party crasher who showed up with the intention of scaring people. Regardless, it was creepy, and I hope me and this Scarecrow never meet again. I'm a 21-year-old male now, but this story happened around 3 years ago. I was 18 years old around the time this happened, and I worked as a waiter in a restaurant in a local mall. I'm very introverted, but it never affected my interaction with my customers, but speaking to people I wasn't serving gave me major butterflies. I had just finished my shift around 5 p.m. and was walking out, when I noticed a woman who looked in pain holding her stomach and was looking right at me. I had to walk past her to get to the exit, and I was trying to avoid her because I was not looking for conversation, and I hated when people asked for money. I know it is selfish, but I worked really hard for the little money that the customers tipped me that day. I maneuvered my way around the people, but she called out to me, and I acted like I didn't hear her and moved faster. Eventually, she ran to me and grabbed my arm, crying, "Please, please, brother, I have children and I got cancer of the stomach." She lifted up her dirty shirt and showed me a large surgery wound across her stomach. I told her I didn't have anything, but she continued to badger me. Eventually, I just ran to the stairs and went upstairs and saw her chasing, but I was way more faster. She slowed down at the second case to catch her breath, and I turned to get off at the third floor where she could not see me. I took the elevator next to the stairs back to the first floor, so I could get to the exit. Eventually, I got to the bus stop and was on my way home. When I got off at my stop, I went to the corner shop to get some snacks. At the end of the road, I saw the woman from the mall and her boyfriend. They must have definitely seen me, even though I purposely made an effort to take the longer way home so they wouldn't have seen me. Around 7 p.m. I get a knock at my gate. For some context, I live in a house that has 2 slide gates in front of the main entrance. I looked out of the window and to my horror, I saw the woman and her boyfriend. I stayed quiet and hoped they'd just go away, but they stayed outside my house for 2 hours until my parents arrived. They begged my parents for money or food to feed their kids. My father found it weird that they were there at 9 p.m, so he told them we didn't have anything to give and to get away from the house before they called the police. Surprisingly, they left without any hassle. I told my parents that these people were begging me for money at the mall and that they followed me home and stayed outside the house for 2 hours. Concerned, my parents say if they ever saw them again, they called the police, and if I ever saw them at work again, to get more security too. But luckily, we never saw them again after that day. It's still a creepy encounter I had, and I feel very lucky that nothing really bad happened, because for all I knew, the woman could have been faking her pain. My name is Alex, and I was 27 years old at the time this happened. I've always been a rational person and believe everything has an explanation. I'm a software engineer working in a small but reputable tech company. My life revolved around lines of code and algorithms, and I rarely gave a second thought to things beyond the screen. That was until that one night when everything changed. It was a chilly autumn evening, and I'd just finished a long day at work. I was exhausted from a long days of work where my eyes hurt dealing with the compiler that I decided to unwind with a late-night jog through a nearby park. I usually did this because I enjoy jogging, and the quietness of the night gave my mind time to relax. I got my running shoes on as soon as I got home and started jogging through the dimly lit paths. The air felt nice on my skin, and I was already feeling good. But as I ran, I felt an eerie sensation, like something wasn't right. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, but I dismissed it as paranoia. I should have paid more attention to my instincts. With each stride, my unease grew. I finally made it to the park, usually bustling with joggers and dog walkers, now felt deserted. It was odd, I thought to myself. I would usually wave hi to Cammy and her dog Max, but this time they weren't there. I just shrugged it off as life happens. I quickened my pace, hoping I would feel better the faster I jogged. Then, I heard it, a faint rustling in the bushes, followed by eerie laughter that stopped me in my tracks. As I slowed my pace, I tried to catch my breath and rationalize the situation. It's probably just some teenagers messing around, I thought. But the laughter grew louder in the woods, and I had an overwhelming feeling that I needed to leave now. The laughter wasn't your normal kids messing around. The laughter sounded evil. It sounded like it came from a deranged person, is the best way I can describe it. Panic surged through my veins as I realized I was no longer alone. Someone or something was lurking nearby, waiting for the right moment to strike. I couldn't see who or what it was. My heart pounded in my chest and I knew I had to get out of there. I sprinted toward the nearest park exit, but the sinister presence kept pace with me, always just out of sight. The laughter turned into a menacing, guttural whisper that taunted me. My mind raced with fear and confusion. Just as I reached the park's entrance, the thing chasing me showed itself under the park's dimly lit light blocking my exit, and I stumbled backward in sheer terror. It was a figure dressed in worn-out clothes, but its face is what disturbed me the most. Its face was obscured by a grotesque mask, eyes gleaming with malevolence. The mask seemed to fuse with its skin, and it emanated a malevolent aura that paralyzed me. With the mask fused to his skin, I realized what he was pulling out behind his back. It was a machete. He or it laughed even more as he pulled it out and started heading towards me. How could this be real, I thought. I was in fight or flight mode, so I took a deep breath and sprinted past the horrifying figure, forcing myself not to look back. He threw the machete at me, but luckily he just missed me. The thing chased me briefly, but then abruptly stopped, retreating back into the woods. My heart pounded and I just kept running, not stopping until I reached the safety of my apartment. During my sprint, I was questioning my own sanity. Who or what was that? Could it be from a long day of work that I was just seeing things? Could it be because Halloween just ended so the freaks are out? No, that didn't make sense. I was trying to rationalize how that scenario made sense. When I got home, I locked all the doors and windows, my hands trembling as I recounted the chilling encounter. I had no explanation for what had just transpired. That night I couldn't sleep, haunted by the memory of the sinister figure and its malevolent laughter. I never returned to that park, and I now avoid dimly lit places after dark. I also never told anyone about this experience until now. If I can't rationalize it, I won't be telling my close friends or family because they are just as rational as me and wouldn't believe me. Heck, I don't even believe what I saw sometimes. Just how my body responded with pure adrenaline as a response to danger made me believe it more. I've done a lot of research and still found nothing to explain my encounter. Hopefully that'll be the first and last time I encounter that thing. I, 17 female, had a creepy encounter just recently involving a haunted house. My parents opened up a haunted house in my dad's shop, and we had a few actors. Names were obviously changed to their role. The actors were me, my dad, my mum, my sister, Bear, Ghostface, Cheerleader, Alien, Prisoner, Doll and Skeleton. I know it's a lot. Let me explain how the setup was. The shop has a store in the front, a gym in the middle and storage in the back. Dad would lead the customer into the storefront and ring the bell to let us know to get ready. Then the customer would pass Bear and Ghostface. Then they would get jump scared by Cheerleader, me and Prisoner, and then pass through the rest. The alien would follow them. Simple enough. So when we were near the end of our time, Dad let in a guy. You know, like normal. I don't want to profile him, but he seemed to be of Arabic descent or Muslim because he was wearing his ethnic clothes. He shall be known as a creepy guy. I think now I should mention most of us are minors. Sister, Bear, Ghostface and Skeleton are middle schoolers, and Cheerleader and Alien and I are high schoolers. Creepy guy touched Bear's shoulder and almost pulled a knife on Bear and Ghostface. After he passed them, he didn't notice Cheerleader but grabbed Alien and scratched his arm. After that, he stared at Prisoner and ignored me. He then started speaking in a different language. It sounded like chanting, but I wasn't sure. He was chanting towards Skeleton, Doll and Sister. Mum then finally ran him off. We were on edge for the rest of the night and closed the haunted attraction for obvious reasons. I have 3 theories. Theory 1. He was a druggie, which is a common thing in my small town, unfortunately. Theory 2. He was a really religious man praying over us. I heard in some religions they don't like or agree with Halloween, so it could be something along that line. Theory 3. He was cursing us. I'm leaning towards one, but it was still creepy. My name is Mark, and I'm 25, about to turn 26 when this happened. I was a dedicated journalist and loved searching for the next big story. My career had taken me to the darkest corners of society, but I'd never encountered anything quite as unsettling as the events that unfolded during my investigation into an urban legend. I had been researching the local legend of a haunted, long-abandoned mansion on the outskirts of town. My curiosity got the best of me, and one gloomy evening, I decided to visit the mansion for an up-close look. I was excited when my boss gave me the go-ahead to explore it. It was a Friday evening, and he gave me permission to do that and to leave work early. As I approached the decaying structure, an overwhelming sense of fear settled upon me. Just looking at the structure gave me the creeps. The mansion looked beautiful and worn with time, but something didn't feel right. Needless to say, I didn't care and still wanted to explore it. I explored the dilapidated mansion, my camera in hand, snapping photos of the decaying grandeur. The fireplace was boarded but surprisingly still intact, and it was beautiful. The floorboards creaked with each step. I was kind of worried of falling through because some floorboards bent a little as I walked on them. But as I descended into the mansion's dimly lit basement, a strange sensation washed over me. It was as if a shadowy presence was watching my every move. I stopped at the basement stairs because of my overwhelming feeling of being watched, and reluctantly went into the basement. The basement was pitch dark, and I had to rely on my camera's flash to illuminate the surroundings. That's when I heard it. A soft, chilling guttural noise that seemed to come from the far corner of the basement. "Leave," it urged in a sinister, hushed voice. My heart pounded as I spun around, looking for the source of the voice. But there, in the dim light, I saw a man, hunched and disheveled, hidden in the shadows. His eyes were wild, and his face contorted into a grotesque grin. He wore tattered clothes and clutched something sharp in his hand. My instincts screamed that this man was deeply disturbed, and I had to get out of there. Fear surged through me, and I turned to flee. But the man lunged toward me with surprising speed, brandishing the sharp object. I dodged his attack, my heart racing, and made a mad dash up the basement stairs. The man gave chase, his manic laughter echoing through the mansion as he pursued me through the decaying corridors. I burst out of the mansion's front door, gasping for breath, and didn't stop running until I was back in the safety of my car. The disturbed man remained inside the mansion, but the feeling of his malevolence lingered. Once I got in the car, I realized all my equipment was gone. I dropped all my expensive equipment as the man was chasing me. Screw that, I thought. I'm not going back in there. My boss can yell at me later if the police don't find it. I reported the incident to the authorities, and the mansion was subsequently cordoned off. As a journalist, I had sought a gripping story, but that night I had come face to face with a disturbed individual whose presence still haunts my thoughts. The police later found my camera and returned it to me. They said the individual was probably a druggie. As they left, I was thinking, why would he leave my camera if he was a druggie? Curious, I looked at the footage and a shiver went down my spine when I saw he took a photo of himself smiling with blood coming out of his nose. I gave it to the police, but sadly they said it was really too dark and not much there to do anything with it, but they'll keep it in file. At my job, you're usually prepared for encounters like this. But with all the training I received, I used none of it. My fight or flight kicked in and luckily I made it out alive. For some context, I'm a 29-year-old single female who loves to be outdoors and be a solo hiker. I often hiked by myself because I'm an introvert and need solitude a lot of the times. I've always found solace in the quietness of the wilderness, far away from the hustle and bustle of city life. However, a recent hiking trip would forever change my perspective on the tranquility of the great outdoors. Oddly enough, I heard about this mysterious remote cabin from my Facebook group and wanted to venture out and explore it. The cabin was supposedly abandoned, and people say a lot of mysterious things happened there. People report that not only was it supernatural, but there were stairs leading to nowhere around it, which caused me to be really curious and wanting to explore even more. The forest was thick and had a dim green light over the trail. The only sounds were the rustling of leaves and the occasional calls of distant birds. My solitude was complete, or so I thought, or so I. As I approached the cabin, I felt a growing sense of unease. The forest seemed to close in around me, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I had an unsettling sense that I was not alone, that there was someone or something lurking in the shadows. The hair on my arm stood on end. Good, I thought. I was also a little bit of a thrill seeker who constantly wanted to experience my own weird stories to tell to my friends. So this was exciting. I finally reached the cabin, and not surprisingly, it looked like an old abandoned cabin tucked within tall trees. Its windows were shattered, and nature took over it with the overgrowth of brush and grass. Also, the door stood slightly ajar, making me think people have explored this before. I cautiously pushed it open with a knife in hand in case something jumped out at me. Inside, the air was heavy with the musky scent to it. When I first walked in, there was a living room with no furniture. Attached to the living room next to it was what looked like the kitchen. Off of those rooms were what I assumed were the bedrooms. A simple layout floor plan, nothing much to it. My footsteps echoed through the mysterious cabin. Then, from the darkness of a corner, a disheveled figure emerged, their eyes wild and unsteady. Their clothes were ragged, and their face was obscured by a matted mess of hair. In their trembling hand, they held a jagged, rusted blade. I felt a knot of terror constrict my chest as I realized I had stumbled upon a person who had seemingly lost their sanity. My heart raced as I slowly backed away, careful not to make any sudden movements. The deranged figure muttered incoherent words, and their gaze never left me. I had to get out of there before things took a dark turn. I backed out of the cabin, one step at a time, my eyes locked onto the disturbed individual. Once I was outside, I turned and ran. I don't think I ever ran so hard in my life. The man pursued me, his frantic laughter echoing through the woods. I sprinted, adrenaline pumping through my veins. The branches cut me mostly on my legs, but also my arms and face. It hurt like hell, but in that moment it didn't matter. I knew I had to get out of there despite a few cuts and bruises. All I was thinking about was running and running hard. Luckily, I hiked these woods before, so I knew a shortcut. I made a beeline to a known campsite, hoping to find people there. With my luck, I was able to see a couple of families. I go to the campsite and probably looked like a maniac, as one dad blocked himself between me and his kids, and the other dad was about ready to take his gun out of his holster. "Stop, stop, stop," I pleaded. "What the hell?" the man asked, still on edge. I tried catching my breath and explained that a man was chasing me. They walked past me and looked around behind me. Total quiet and silence. No man. Not even a cricket chirping. The families looked at me all concerned, but I kept trying to convince them a crazy man did run after me with a knife. I was on so much adrenaline that I didn't realize my own knife was still in my hand. As I slowly put it away, the tension calmed down. The man was gone, and I knew I had escaped a potentially dangerous situation. I didn't realize it then, but I was bleeding pretty badly from one of my legs that one of the mums gave me a first aid to clean up all the blood where the branches cut my skin before they escorted me back to my car. I drove back and reported the incident. The officers said they will check it out, but there's not much they can do. I later warned the Facebook group of what I encountered. Some believed me and some didn't, which didn't matter. Either way, I'm glad I made it out with my life and I never went back there again. I was a 22-year-old college student who was studying biology when this creepy encounter occurred. For some context, I preferred working full-time on my internship during the day and taking classes at night. My internship paid me good money, so I wanted to work as many hours as possible, so I would have less student debt at the end of graduating. I was never really concerned with safety, since I dormed at one of the safest college campuses in my state. My life was a whirlwind of assignments and exams to the point it was automatic. But one night, I realized that I should also pay attention to my surroundings, especially at night. When you're young, you never think anything bad would happen to you, or that you're indestructible. Well, unfortunately, I'm here to tell you you're not. It all started with another night at a late evening college class around 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. that would lead to a creepy encounter on my way home. The class had ran longer than usual, sadly, and the teacher finally dismissed us with our assignments. I stayed back to chat with some friends, but they had to get in their cars and leave, and I had a little 10-minute walk ahead of me. I always enjoyed walking across campus late at night. It was the perfect winding down from my long day of work, studying and classes. It was calm and peaceful and had a nice breezy night air. Campus was completely empty as I headed my way back to my dorm. The streets were dimly lit and a thick fog hung in the air, creating an eerie atmosphere which I enjoyed. As I was walking, I suddenly had a strange feeling that I never had before on my walks back. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I looked around and saw nothing but quickened my pace anyway. I suddenly started hearing footsteps, and they weren't typical walking footsteps. They were fast and intentional. As I turned a corner, I noticed a man lingering in the shadows. He was dressed in all black and his face was obscured by a hood, and a mess of hair was breaking through it. His presence sent off all the alarm bells in my body, and when he began to follow me at a distance, I knew I was in trouble. My heart raced as the man's footsteps grew closer. I tried to rationalize the situation, thinking maybe he was just heading in the same direction as me, but my instinct screamed otherwise. I increased my pace and so did he. Panic washed over me and I started to hyperventilate. I turned a corner, my mind racing, and I realized the man was no longer behind me. I breathed a sigh of relief, but as I carefully looked around me, I spotted him standing in the shadows, his hood concealing his features still. I couldn't see his face, but I could feel his predatory gaze. The man was no longer following me. He was stalking me. Desperation coursed through me, and I knew I had to escape this freaky situation. I changed my route. I knew of a 24-hour coffee and convenience shop my campus has, so I went there. Veering into a brightly lit convenience store, my heart pounding as I continually looked at the man. He hesitated, but ultimately didn't enter the store. The store clerk noticed my distress and offered to call the police. I nodded and said yes, I was that scared. I stayed in the store until the police arrived, describing the man who had been following me. They conducted a thorough search of the area but found no trace of him. I was shaken but relieved to be safe. After that, any time I needed to walk home at night, I'd have my friends walk with me or have them drive me to my dorm. I was not going to experience that again, and luckily I have not. My name is Danny, and I was 12 years old at the time of writing this. I lived in a small town, and behind my house, there's a thick forest that my friends and I love to explore. One sunny afternoon after school, we decided to venture deeper into the woods, beyond where we'd normally go. We were bored and thought it'd be fun to go deeper. It was myself and my friends Sam and Jake. We did this often since our parents didn't like for us to be inside for too long. This was before iPhones, so you can imagine playing in the forest was our only main source of pure entertainment. Other than video games, but my brother was an idiot and broke our game console that summer, but that's a story for a different time. The forest was dense and we followed a winding trail with our stick at hand, swatting at the tall overgrown grass. We didn't have a clear destination in mind, but we were on an adventure and exploring where we had never been before, so that was exciting enough. After what felt like hours of hiking, we stumbled upon a set of train tracks, the rusty metal stretching into the horizon. Beside it was an old, rickety bridge looming, its wooden planks worn by the passage of time. We decided to follow the tracks for a while, our imagination running wild as we pretended to be on a grand journey. As we continued, the forest grew quieter, and a sense of unease settled in. It was as if the world around us had paused, waiting. The air grew heavy, and our excitement turned into being scared and on edge. As we neared the bridge, we spotted a man sitting on the tracks, his clothes ragged and torn. He had a scruffy beard and matted hair, and he was hunched over something we couldn't quite see. The stench of decay and something foul filled the air. I wanted to turn back, but Sam and Jake were curious and wanted to keep going. I had the worst feeling in my stomach ever. We admittedly weren't the nicest boys. We were sort of those tough bullies in school, which I'm not proud of by any means. But Jake and Sam wanted to see if they could pick on the person. We approached cautiously, our curiosity mixed with fear. As we got closer, our worst fears were confirmed. The man was eating something. A rat, or at least what appeared to be a rat, gnawing on it with a ravenous hunger. Our stomachs churned and we stepped back in horror. The man turned toward us, his eyes wild and unfocused. He muttered incoherent words and reached out as if to grab us. Panic gripped us and we turned and ran, not stopping until we reached the safety of our neighborhood. It was much darker out, but luckily we had Sam, who had a built-in compass, it seemed like. Wherever we went, he knew the way back instantly, like he traveled it before many times. We told our parents about the encounter, and they called the police, who promised to investigate the situation. As it turns out, the man wasn't there. Shocker, we all thought. It was a haunting experience that stayed with us for a while. We were never allowed to explore further in the woods again. We had to be in eyesight at all times from then on, which I can't say I blame my mum. I, 27 male, was up one late night at around 3 a.m. I was relaxing at my home and on PC, watching movies, playing games, etc., when I noticed I was out of cigarettes. The only thing that stays open this late at night is our local gas station, not too far from my home, but still it's easier to go with a car. I took my car keys and locked my house and I went to the gas station. I live in a small European country, which is generally the safest country on the planet. Still, that doesn't mean that some bad things don't happen here and there. When you exit from a suburban area where I live, you need to take a right so you can take the main road. After that, you just go straight for about 1 kilometre, and then go left for another kilometre to get to the gas station. Halfway through the drive, I noticed some girl walking on the sidewalk. Keep in mind, I usually drive slower at night because at this time a lot of people would speed and go through a red light. Anyway, I noticed she was walking faster than usual. It looked like she was panicking, and I noticed 2 guys behind her who were like 10 feet away, maybe less, pointing at her and doing some hand gestures towards her. They gave me a really creepy vibe. As I was getting close to the girl, I noticed she had a worried face on, like she was about to cry but didn't cry. So I pulled over close to her and said very quietly, "Are you in trouble?" And she just looked at me and noted with the nod of her head that she was. I told her to get in the car and she did. I told her I'm going to the gas station to get some cigarettes, but I will take her home as soon as I finish buying the cigarettes. She thanked me for what seemed like hundreds of times. I asked if she wanted to report the incident to the police, but she said only to take her home. I went to the gas station and bought me some cigarettes and a bottle of water for her. She was clearly still in fear and I felt really bad for her. Luckily, she didn't live too far away and I dropped her off at her home after that. We passed the same street where those two guys followed her, but those guys were never to be seen again. Imagine if I didn't run out of cigarettes that night. See, everyone, addiction can be a good thing when you have a chance to help someone out in need. Just kidding, but you understand. I know I should quit, but it felt good knowing I helped someone who could have been in a really bad situation had I not intervened. Okay, so just to preface this, my friend and I were 18-year-old females at the time, and this happened on a Friday. My friend and I had smoked weed before going out to eat to catch a movie. So my friend and I are in line at Burger King and trying to decide if we want to split a meal or get separate meals. My friend orders her food, and when I get to order mine, I get asked straight if we smoked weed. My first thought and question was, is it that noticeable? Now I could barely hear this guy because he was speaking low but was asking about a certain strain that I could really care less about. But it gets to the point where he tells me how much I could get for a certain price point, which I said I would keep that in mind. Now my friend and I didn't spray any perfume or body spray, which we normally do, but completely forgot this time, unfortunately. I get to the table my friend picked out and I start telling her about what just happened. Not even a minute after I sit down does this guy come over and pass me a folded up napkin of this weed to sample. Now my friend and I are just shocked and talking about this. I ended up putting the napkin in my bra because it was the only place I could. I had no pockets. This guy ends up coming to our table 3, 4 more times within the span of 15, 20 minutes. When I went up to get my food before these other encounters occurred, this guy had let me know that he got off at 7:30 p.m. and asked if we wanted to hang out. I straight up said that my friend and I were on a date and were going to a movie straight after this. After I got my food, this guy stopped at our table to ask what movies were playing, what his name was, which I don't remember what he said, just that it has something to do with the California's state bird, and the other times I can't remember why he came over. He just spoke to me and not my friend, and I could tell this guy was trying to get some information on me. Now I'm a very private person, and also a very cautious person. I could tell this guy was trying something and I acted dumb, even though I knew what was going on. My friend had noticed that, after the last time he came over, that this guy was staring at me any time he passed by. I could tell he was staring at me because of the windows that made a reflection because my back was to him. It got a point where I told my friend we need to hurry because this is making me uncomfortable. So we finished quickly and left. Now my friend and I did originally go to the movie theatre, but decided to watch the movie at home because of how busy it was. Luckily we made it to my home safely without any further encounters. In hindsight, I guess he could have been following us, but we haven't noticed. Nothing else really significant happened the rest of the night, thankfully. I don't think I will be going back to that Burger King anytime soon because my hair colour is blue. It's very noticeable, and not many people have that colour in my town. Plus it's a smallish town. I hope to never meet this guy again, and if I do, I may have to have a backbone, especially if he acts like he did this time. Not a very scary story, and also trying to tell this days later doesn't help, but that's my creepy encounter. This creepy encounter happened recently as I was driving home from work. For a little context, I'm a 26-year-old male who works as security for a local tech building. I typically leave work at around 3 a.m. So, as I was leaving work, I came across the usual intersection not too far from my house. There was a car from the opposite side of the road, facing me, who was turning into where I'm going, and we almost hit each other. We both stopped on time and it was no big deal, so I thought. But the guy in the car is noticeably yelling at me from inside his car, giving me the middle finger and all. Alright, so I let him go ahead and I thought that would be the end of road rage for tonight, but wow, was I wrong. Immediately after I let the guy through, behind him was a car turning very fast, so I accelerated and quickly got in front of him. Not out of ego or anything, I just thought that considering the position of my car in the turning lane, it's likely that this dumbass would hit me. So I was extremely worried and wanted to prevent a car collision at all costs. I still had to take a class due to a speeding issue, and my license may or may not be suspended because another asshole also decided to hit me. So I was really avoiding to not get hit at any cost. Right afterwards, this guy is obviously mad and starts flickering his extremely bright lights at me for a minute straight. It was getting really annoying really fast, considering something brighter than the damn sun is shining at me for a minute. You can tell it's freaking hard to navigate at night like that. So, against my better judgment and the need to be petty, I decided to annoy this guy further and slow down to around 30 miles an hour from 50 for a minute or so. In hindsight, it probably wasn't the best idea to mess with an unstable person. To my surprise, he was still flicking his lights, but not as much now. At this point, I was close to home and turned into my subdivision, thinking this whole saga would end then and there. But in a shocking twist, this guy follows me into my maze of a neighborhood, and I get near my house and he's still following me. I freaked out and was wondering, should I just park in my driveway and he might go away, or should I just go into a random neighborhood and lose him there? So as soon as I pass my house, I decide to go right past it and into another neighborhood a couple minutes away, and sure enough, he follows me there. I figured my best course of action now is to try to lose him as I went to my friend's house, whose dad has a nice arsenal of weapons. Once this psycho sees my friend's dad come out of the house with his cigs and beer at hand and gun on his waistband that he always carries, I'm sure this guy will back off. No one in their right minds would mess with my friend's dad. He's a nice guy to those closest around him, but once an idiot talks to him the wrong way, he has no problem fighting him. So at this point, I left that neighborhood and I just stomped on my gas pedal and sped down the road and made a random right turn. At this point, he's still following me, but it's a red light for him, so thankfully he stops. And after that, he lost me. I went around my neighborhood a few times to be sure that I did lose him, and luckily I didn't need to get the help of my friend's dad. So I was able to head home, but not surprisingly, I didn't get much sleep that night. I constantly looked out of my bedroom window facing the road, seeing if this man has passed by my house yet. Luckily, not that I saw. Honestly, this was a scary experience for me, considering my suburb isn't too far from very dangerous hoods where gunshots can be heard often. Who knows if I would have stopped my car at home? Maybe this guy would have got a gun out and shoot me. It's just unsettling that this guy would follow me to my house just to scare me. Although it's not surprising, I guess, because there were a lot of crazy people around our suburbs, and sadly with guns. I, 31 female, bought my first home back in 2016 on my own as a single young woman. I was so proud and excited, especially after finally leaving the toxic guy I was with the previous 5 years on and off. It was the fresh start I needed. Anyways, I moved in. Just me, no roommate, and my ex had never been there before. The house was a small 2-bedroom rancher built in the 60s but updated a little bit. It had a dirt crawl space for storage and a huge fenced-in yard with 3 gates, which was perfect for me and my dog Max. The 3 gates were a metal gate, a small gate to get to the front door, and an old wooden gate to pull into the covered garage type area. I'm a nursing assistant, so I do a lot of night shifts, and after living in the house for a few weeks, I get home from a night shift at 6 a.m, starting to get light outside, and I notice there is apples all over my front yard. Not apples off a tree though, store-bought apples with the stickers thrown all over my front yard. I was pretty tired, so I just brushed it off as kids messing around and went to sleep. A few weeks later, I got off another night shift and everything seemed normal as most mornings, so I went to bed. I had a house sitter the weekend prior as I went on a girls' trip with some friends, so the house sitter had some people over to have drinks, which was totally fine, but they had left cans in my fire pit. When I woke up after sleeping that day, I went to let my dog outside to pee in the backyard, and all the cans as well as burnt chunks of wood were laid in a perfect circle around the outside of my fire pit. This seemed odd, but I just kind of thought it was some neighborhood kids messing around. Another few weeks goes by and I again get off the night shift. I pull in my driveway and my heart sinks to see all my gates wide open. They were all closed and latched when I left. Something just felt off this time, but I was tired after a long shift and told myself not to get freaked out over stupid kids being annoying and went to sleep. That following weekend I had off and my cousin wanted to go to the movies, so I agreed and she picked me up. When I left, I put my dog in the house, locked the door and left the porch light on since it would be dark when I got back home. When I got back, I came home to find my dog outside, the door left unlocked and the porch light turned off. The switch for the light is inside, and this time I was freaked out. I called my dad to come check the house for me. I was convinced someone had done this from the inside and that someone lives in my crawl space. But he came and checked and found nothing. I ended up getting a roommate to ease my mind a little and feel a little safer. So a guy from work was looking for a place to live, so I offered him a room and he accepted. He was a big dude, so I felt if it was someone messing with me, they would think twice with him living there. And boy was I sadly wrong. One night I was home alone as my roommate was working night shift. I fell asleep on the couch watching a movie, and I woke up to a missed call from a random number. I googled the number since I had never seen it before, and it was a number from one of those apps you could download to call or text anonymously from. So I tried calling it back, no answer. Then seconds later I get a text saying, "How's the movie?" I ask who this is and they say, "Who do you think this is?" I ask my roommate if he's messing with me and he replies from his normal number, "No, why?" I started panicking and goosebumps appeared all over my body. So I tell the random number to cut it out, that this isn't funny, but they continue to say things to me as if they can see me. I'm super creeped out and ran to my window and closed the blinds. They then begin to ask me to come outside to see who it is, and I run to my door and locked it. Then they say, "It's Corey." I didn't know a Corey. I ignored the texts, and they eventually stopped, and I waited until my roommate got home so I could sleep. Nothing ever happened again after that, and I still live in this house with my now husband. To this day, I still don't know who or what that was. I am genuinely curious what everyone else thinks this is. Was I overreacting? Could this have been my toxic ex-boyfriend? It still haunts me to this day, never being able to find out who that was or what its motives were. This may not be an excessively creepy experience, but it is an unsettling experience nonetheless. It all happened in 2015 around this time of year. Back then I would walk a bike path daily to this bridge that led out to a bigger pond and back. It was roughly 5 miles and it ventured through several parks, but was overall in a pretty urban area. It was around 3 to 4 p.m. in the afternoon on this day. The sun was shining and the cooler air made the walk much more enjoyable than the summer heat where I would constantly get bitten by mosquitoes. The bike path gently descends beneath multiple road overpasses, and there's a slightly spooky and uncertain feeling when you find yourself right in the midst of these dips, as they create a sort of miniature tunnel formed by the overhanging structure. Anyway, I was walking down the dip, and I heard a bike coming down the hill fast behind me. I stepped over further to the right but didn't really look back, and was startled at the fact that the cyclist practically grazed me as it passed, instead of giving me a good distance between us, because there was plenty of room where he or she didn't need to graze me. I was kind of flustered and annoyed, it all happened so fast. Then the woman stopped a little bit ahead of me and started to look back at me, and I thought, oh shoot, confrontation. But when she looked in my direction, I realized the cyclist was actually just a really large child that I'd mistaken for an adult. It was still kind of dark where she stopped, so I couldn't fully see her expression, but she stayed still with her head facing me for several seconds. I could tell by her silhouette that she was indeed staring back at me. She was just frozen and silent, propped up on the bike with her foot out, and it creeped me out to say the least. I wondered if maybe she was non-verbal and just expressing frustration about our near collision in the only way she knew how. Or was she socially awkward or a mentally crazy person? I just didn't know, so I said nothing, unsure of what to do next. Anyway, I stopped walking towards her because it felt a little creepy, and I just gently said something in acknowledgement. I don't think I said hi or anything, I don't really remember. Anyway, she suddenly turned and pedaled off in the same direction I was headed. She wasn't with an adult or anyone that I could see. I looked around and I didn't see any more bikers coming down the long trailing path. or heard any more bikers after her at all. I kind of stopped thinking about it as I walked, as she just seemed like an annoyed kiddo. I was able to enjoy the rest of my walk and take in the beautiful landscapes. I stopped a couple of times and took pictures of the beautiful changing coloured of leaves overlooking the pond area that I was able to walk to. But as I hiked back off the trail, I noticed something under my car. The trail meets up with public parking, which happens to be at a public school lot. It briefly borders the parking lot, so I could see something under my car as I approached. I realised it was a bike, and to this day I'm still 95% sure it was the girl's bike. It was under the back of my car, like someone tried to lay it down flat and shove it under there. I still feel extremely disturbed remembering it, because I can't for the life of me think of an explanation behind any of this. At the time I was worried someone in the lot was watching me as I noticed the bike and removed it, but I didn't see anyone or have any problems as I left. I just leaned the bike against a tree and left. I didn't pay close attention to too many details about the bike when I saw the girl, because it was such a brief encounter. But I remember thinking it looked boring because it was white on grey, or something very plain and not typically girly. I guess I could be wrong about it being her bike, and it could have been a coincidence, but it was just so strange, and I wanted to share this story. If anyone can tie this together, or if I'm just overthinking it, please let me know. Okay, so for some prior context, I live on a horse farm or barn property. There's 3 sections to the property: the main barn, the courtyard, and the living quarters. The main barn is exactly what it sounds like, but there is a door that goes upward and into a large apartment where most of my family lives. My family consists of my parents and little sister, who's a toddler, myself and my older brother, who are both teenagers and almost young adults. We live separately, in the living quarters, which is in the front of the barn. Between the living quarters and barn is the courtyard, a circular, flat and open empty stone brick area. The living quarters are shaped kind of like an L, with 3 rooms and 1 massive room. The 3 rooms are bedrooms, with the furthest being my grandfather's, who was not here when this story takes place, mine, and then my older brother's. The massive room is the living room. The upstairs area has a stairwell leading up to it, with a door on each side. Okay, so to the actual story itself. It was around midnight, but I couldn't tell you exactly when. I think around 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. is the range. It was raining badly. I was in the barn upstairs, hanging out with my parents, talking about something stupid like politics, completely unimportant to the story. A break comes in the conversation though, and as I lean forward to stand up, we all hear at once the sound of someone punching the door to the stairwell in the barn leading upstairs. They punched 8 times. My older brother's the only person supposed to be on the property, and he not only knows not to knock loudly since our little sister's sleeping, but that door wasn't locked. There was no reason to knock. I was the closest to the door and I'm a pretty anxious person, but I always underestimate it near family. For some reason, the way the knocking continued put me off so much that I immediately broke into some weird anxiety attack, and my family, seeing that, all acted with me despite not being too worried yet. I locked the door, told my dad to call 911. My mum called my sister and I grabbed a knife while my dad grabbed his pistol. The upstairs area has 2 what you can call balconies that overlook the inside of the barn, and my dad stepped out there, looking over the inside to make sure nothing was going on. I kept my head to the door and kept hearing something going on. It sounded like somebody was walking up and down the stairs, trying to be quiet, but being really bad at it. It got to the point where I felt like I was playing chess with somebody trying to hurt my family. I wouldn't let my mum stand directly in front of the door because somebody wanting to get to us would probably just shoot right through the door, hitting her directly. The police said they were on their way and it would be 20 minutes. Anyway, calling to my older brother, we obviously asked if it was him and he just said, "So that wasn't you?" Turns out, at the exact same moment, somebody slammed on the window facing him. He was just frozen, and it took him multiple seconds to turn. By then, nobody was there. My mum started looking over our cameras and there were no visual alerts, despite there being a camera perpendicular to my older brother's window. It would be physically impossible to not be seen, unless the camera didn't catch it from the insane amount of rain pouring down. We waited and waited, what seemed like forever, remaining frozen to our position. 20 minutes passed, and the cops still weren't here. Confused, obviously, my dad called the operator and asked why the cops still haven't arrived. All they could say was, "There's similar reports in your area. They're going to the previous report first." Most of the family was decently safe with at least a gun, but for 20 to 30 straight minutes, my brother was forced to stand in a room in complete silence, unarmed, with 3 different unlocked doors and an uncovered window that someone had been staring at him through just a few moments ago, while knowing the police weren't coming. Eventually, though, through all of the different and more minor things going on, the police got here and checked over everything. Nobody, nothing, not a single sign of anybody having been there. And here's one of the worst parts. Only one camera caught something, and it was only because one of our barn cats, a white one that stood against the black background, accidentally activated it and made it start recording. And what it caught was both of the knocks, both on my brother's window and the downstairs door. 8 seconds apart. And the absolute worst part, which is the thing that keeps me from sleeping the most, is that in the months it's been since the incident, it takes a whole 30 seconds of full sprint on dry ground to get from the window to the door. Not to mention it was pouring rain and that you would be caught by 4 separate cameras. If somebody could please explain, I'd be super appreciative. Despite not believing in ghosts, I'm open to literally anything at this point. So this happened about 11 years ago when I was about 16. Those days after school let out, my grandparents would drop me off at the local youth centre. It was a very small old building on a rundown street. Right next to the youth centre there was a bar. I had been told time and time again to never play around outside. Since the area was rough, anything could happen. Now, for a little extra context, the youth centre receptionist, guide, sat at a desk and watched over everyone. Also, they had a camera system mounted on a wall inside to ensure visitors in the front area were safe. One day, there were 4 of us at the centre. We were all doing our own thing, working on homework, reading, playing games. Kyle, a friend I had made at the centre, stopped by. Now Kyle was a grade above me, nice enough too, but he was a little bossy. Anyway, he grew bored sitting with us and said he wanted some air, pressuring, "Come on, are you seriously scared?" At this time it was getting dark out. I could see the sky going black from the front window. For some reason we still followed him outside. I remember trailing him across the street to a big dirt lot full of debris. We all huddled together, laughing and dancing and just goofing off. That is, until we saw a strange man waddling down the empty street towards us. He was about 30, had tousled neck-length brown hair, was skinny, pale, dressed in a dirty hoodie and jeans. He was smiling a lot, like creepy, insane-level smile. "Hey, he rasped. "You kids having fun?" Kyle was unfazed, cheerfully answered with a duh. The rest of us were quiet, put off by the man's arrival. "Want to come hang with me?" This moment stays with me because I remember getting a bad feeling in my stomach, like I knew he could hurt us. And then, the man tucked a hand into his hoodie, slow, deliberate. Kyle and I started making a bunch of noise and we all booked it back across the street. I heard the man's hyena shriek laughter as we ran into the centre. I'm forever grateful we got out of that situation safely. After that scare, I continued to visit the centre and never mentioned this incident to family, but I was much more careful, staying indoors. Always trust your gut. I wanted to take a moment and express my appreciation for everyone who's been listening, and a special thanks to everyone who has already subscribed to my YouTube channel. But if you have yet to like, comment and/or subscribe, please consider doing so, as it really lets me know you enjoy and appreciate this type of content. If you have some scary stories you would like to share, please send them in my email down below. Also, if you have any suggestions on what type of scary stories you would like to see, please let me know that as well. Thanks again.